get a few more. So we'll start in a minute or so, and if you can come a bit forward or grab an empty chair that may be around, that would be great.
Good morning, everybody. And can I just say, wow, we are here. It's incredible. Despite COVID, air travel problems, train strikes, we've made it, and it's absolutely brilliant to be back. So I really want us all to just celebrate wildly over the weekend and enjoy it. There are so many familiar faces here today, and it's not just our own year groups, of course, but it's also seeing our first years for the first time in a long time, and our second years for a long time. And for the classes of 1971 and the classes of 1981, we're seeing both at the same time, which I have to say is great. It's full on, but it's absolutely wonderful. And we're sorry for those of you who can't be here. This is being live streamed, so whoever's listening and watching online, we really are very sorry that you can't be with us, but you're here in spirit. And this afternoon, of course, we're going to pay tribute and commemorate those of us who we've lost in the last few years. Each weekend now we're going to be doing something specific for one of the headmasters, but we're also going to pay tribute to those we've lost from the era of the 70s and also the era of the 80s. So basically, I hope we have a very poignant, a very fun weekend, a very memorable one, but also a very stimulating one and a very exciting one. We want you to leave feeling that the college is really going places again and that we're very excited about our future, and we want you to be excited about our future as well. I don't think I need to introduce myself to everyone. You know I'm Jill. I'm from Jersey, so I was always known as Jill from Jersey when I was here. And of course, like most of us, the 2 years that we had at the college were transformational, and that's why I'm giving back now as chair of the board. I think it's true to say we're all here because we care. We care about our friends. We care about the college. We care about what it stands for. And so we're hoping today we're going to be able to give you some key areas that we're heading in and key serious direction of travel that we're working towards, particularly as far as our educational offering is concerned. I am very confident that our students here at the college are remarkable. We just had the graduation ceremony 2 weekends ago. They are resilient, they are compassionate, they are idealistic, they are fun, they're leaving with great memories and great friends, and they're the spitting image of us 40 years ago or 50 years ago. So it's just wonderful to see that. It really is special. And if we think about it, it's the whole experience we had when we were here that really made the difference. So let's reminisce a bit, and let's refresh our memories a bit, and let's reflect a bit on what that was like over the course of the weekend. The hugely diverse student population that we experienced, that they are experiencing now, thanks to our brilliant scholarship program, was enormous in terms of shaping our 2 years. We grew together, we supported each other, we trained together, we did great things together. Some of us even fell in love and got married and had kids together afterwards. I can see you waving. You know who you are. So it was an exceptional 2 years that made a major impact on our lives. And I think what's fascinating now is, of course, it's not just Atlantic College anymore. Of course, all of you from the 70s only knew us as Atlantic College. But it's really special that the experiment that was started in the 60s here was so successful that it's now been rolled out to 17 other schools and colleges across the globe. And that is massive. We are really spreading the message and making a significant impact across the globe. And that's very, very exciting to be part of a bigger movement. So I just wanted to then add that we will be back again, of course, in the future. Maybe with a few more wrinkles and a few more white hairs, or maybe a little bit less hair on our heads, but we will be back again. And I really want you to feel that there's a lot happening at the college and that you have the assurance that the college is in a really good place and making really good progress. Much work has been done in the last year. I can't begin to tell you how much work has been done in the last year, but you are going to hear that in a minute. The role of the board is significant, and I think you all know a role of a board. Of course, it's to guard the mission. Of course, it's to participate and drive forward strategic thinking. It's got legal and fiducial responsibilities, but the most important thing we do is hire the head. And when I first took over the job 2 years ago, in September 2020, we had to find a new head. And we set up a task force. We found a worldwide recruitment company. We had 100 applications. We had a very comprehensive process. And I am delighted that we found Naheed, and Naheed found us. He is so passionate. He gets UWC through and through. He gets what needs to be done. But he's also super focused, organized, and keeps us all on track. And the combination of those two things is exactly what this college needs now. His main focus in the last year has been looking at educational offering, and we've got a really exciting new purpose ahead of us, and I'm not going to steal his thunder. He's going to talk about that with you shortly. But he's also been working on a lot of other stuff. Great building relationships with the IB at a senior level now, thanks to Naheed. He's also been leading on the strategy, and I know some of you in the room are really interested in that. So we've been evolving a strategic planning process over the course of the last 6 months, which has been really exciting. He's appointed new leadership team to the current leadership team that we've got. We now have a capital projects plan for the next period of time, including this beautiful old castle, which Naheed will tell you about a bit more. And we've got very strong relationships now. The board, my chair, but also I want to pay tribute to Ruth Rawling, who's our vice chair, who you met last night, who's sitting at the front. We're a much more open and engaged board now. And we're a very excited board, and we're full of joy, and it's for the future. And we have a great working relationship with Naheed and the leadership team. And we're also building a better relationship with UWC International. That is so important to both Naheed and myself. And anybody here who works for national committees, and I know I can see quite a few faces around who do a sterling job, thank you. The national committee structure, just wonderful. And how we get our students to come to the college is all credit to the 150 national committees that we have around the world and all the volunteers. So a massive thank you to you. So you're getting a sense much has changed. We're in a good place. We really are going forward. The 60th, of course, is looming. That starts the 1st of October. And we want you to participate in whatever way, shape, or form you can. Support us, challenge us, represent us where you can, share the good things that we're doing with whoever you come across. We are one family, and we really need your help and support as we go forward for the next 10 years. So thank you again for coming, and I'm now going to pass you over to Naheed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, and it's been a really wonderful year so far. I just joined in July, and this last 2 days, yesterday and today, have been just absolutely wonderful. What a joy to see all of you and all the smiling faces, and the opportunity to see you reunite with friends and colleagues, and it's just such a joy, and to see the impact that this college has made on so many. It is such an honor and privilege to be able to be in this role that I am at this current time. So, I would argue that education is the most deeply human endeavor that exists. The responsibility and fortune to be able to care for and help young people grow in ways that hopefully they never thought that they could is such an important moral responsibility. And as a principal, you cannot divorce your professional life from your person, right? Those separations are false. And so it's important that you know me a little bit personally, because that's what I bring in all of me and all that I do. And so I start with my family. So this is my partner, my wife Edwina, and my 2 kids. The taller one there is Rainan, and the shorter one is Nabi. They're 5 and they're 3. And what a beautiful, beautiful place to raise children. I can't imagine a better place in the world and a better community to be in to raise my children. And for me, that says it all in terms of my feelings of the first year here. there's nothing really more to say about how I feel about being here. So in that sense, really from a personal standpoint, truly a spectacular place to be. My journey, a little bit of how I got here. In brief, I'm born in Canada. My parents are from East Africa, my grandparents from India, and so they were on the colonial train, I guess you could say, the British project of sorts, and so we sort of come full circle now in some ways, which is interesting, and actually one of the motivators, to be honest, because I think it's important that we begin representing more and more perspectives around what's happened in the past, and it's great to be able to do that here. For me, that's important. So for me, growing up there, my dad came as a refugee from Uganda. He was an entrepreneur and started his own software writing company in the early 80s. And I looked up to him and wanted to follow in his footsteps. And so at university, I did a sort of combined degree in computer science and business. And I had a short stint in business for a very short time. I worked at a sort of management consulting firm for a short time. That was a former BCG and McKinsey partners in Australia, and was in charge of helping a steel company to rebrand. That was my project that I was working on, and had a chance then to travel the world not too sort of soon after that, and realized that perhaps I wanted to give back in a small way differently, rather than through business but through education. And so went on to do my teaching qualification, because I always felt like if I wanted to be the CEO of a company of sorts, how could I do that if I didn't understand what the baseline of that company did? How could I be good in that kind of role? So I felt if I was going to be a good leader in education or a curriculum writer or policy or whatever it was, if I don't understand the baseline of education, how can I be good at that? And the baseline is teaching. You can have the best policy, the best curriculum in the world. If you don't have good teachers to help to bring it out, then it's just paper sitting on a shelf. And so managed to do my first bit of career in Kenya at a school called the Aga Khan Academy in Mombasa. I spent 10 years there, where I met my wife. And from there, went back to Toronto to spend some time with my parents, who still live there. I didn't want to be the kind of son who lives away for a long time and only comes back when they're not healthy. They're still in good health, and I wanted to go back and spend a few good years with them at that time and start a family while we were there. So was at a school called Upper Canada College, which is about 180 degrees different from here. All boys, about 200 years old, made in Eaton's image, type of thing. And for me, it was resonant, but not resonant enough with who I am as a person. And so when this opportunity came about, I absolutely couldn't resist applying, and luckily it worked out, and have had just a wonderful, wonderful journey so far, and huge thanks to Ruth and to Jill for all of their tremendous support this year, and it's been a really fantastic journey so far. So of course, this is fundamentally about the students, and COVID has been tough, but this was the best coming out of COVID activity that we had. It was called the 24-hour race, and some of you in this room were a part of that as well, which was wonderful. So just the most COVID-friendly activity you could possibly have, running for 24 hours outside in teams of 8 was great. Let's look at the pool and some of the activities out there. And again, thanks to so many in this room who helped with the seafront and some of the refurbishments there, and helping to bring the seafront back to life in so many ways. And that's the pool, which hopefully you've seen as you've been down. Activities that we're still able to do during the pandemic. This is all photos from this year. So some wonderful performances from our students this year. This was during Holi in the spring, which was really nice. This is a group of 4 students, 1 who graduated the previous year, 3 who graduated this year. The person in the middle there, Abu, he was really sort of the engine room behind this, where they started and they created an app that was designed for refugees, built by refugees. He's a refugee from Afghanistan who was in Belgium and then came from Belgium to the college here. The one to his left is a refugee from Yemen who also was at the college. And they wanted to help to build a specific language app that was geared towards refugees going to their host country to learn the local language. And they eventually put their proposal in forward to MIT and were shortlisted for a global prize in innovation at MIT. And then now they're graduates, and they've received some funding from the college through something called the Lighthouse, this amazing project that we have here that a donor from the late 90s helped to start for us, and just a really sort of sign of what can be done even in a pandemic, what our students were able to do. So Jill mentioned briefly some of the work we've been doing this year, and it's been really exciting. So one of the first tasks the board gave me when I arrived to say, really help us to be able to define who we are and what we are. We know of our past, which is tremendous, and it's been such a joy learning more and more about that. And I'm envious of what many of you lived in your times here. And how do we refocus ourselves as we go forward? Why should we exist at our 70th birthday? Fundamentally. And that's been really wonderful to be able to think about and work on and connect with some people in this room and others around that. And so the first part you see there is around vision, and apologize if it's a bit small for the people in the back, but it's just to kind of demonstrate the timeline that we've been on. We've been in the process of articulating that vision. And then once we were doing that, then we realized that we had to have a strategy. A vision is great. Schools are known for being amazing places to think of brilliant ideas, but are traditionally horrible at executing those ideas. Okay? And so we had to have a strategy that was there to then bring those ideas to life, and that's what we've been working on as well. And for those who want to come to the later session that I'll be doing after this, I'll be talking a bit more about the strategy and seeking your feedback on that. So please do join if you are able. Very briefly on the strategy side, we've been trying to do it as an inclusive way as possible. So the first phase there you see is sort of the scan phase, where we went through a massive kind of typical SWOT analysis type of style to surface challenges and opportunities that we had seen as a community. We then took those and clustered them into buckets. We then went to the discovery phase. We had 7 broad buckets, including educational innovation, sustainability, pluralism and peace, outdoor experiential education, well-being were some of the buckets that we had. We then had volunteers from our community, staff and students together, forming 7 teams. We had 80 volunteers in total. We had 30 staff and 50 students who volunteered, about 10 or 12 hours worth of time in teams, doing research about what's happening around the globe in those areas around best practice, and helping to bring that back to our leadership team so that we could have a jump start on what was happening in the world in those areas. And then in the develop phase, where we worked together with our leadership and management group to really build then out those ideas. And we're now at the feedback stage, which is right now. And so we really wanted to time this so we could have something in concept to share with you, so you could get your feedback on it. And that's where we're at right now in this process. So these slides, don't worry about the detail. It's just to prompt and stimulate a bit of thinking, okay? So as we try to understand our world, so this is population growth over time. This is urban and rural populations over time and how they have changed, swapped, if you will. Global meat production over time based on region. This is the Living Planet Index. This is measured in 1970 at 100%, and it was 21,000 species that were measured. And this is showing the decline of living species over time to 2016. Annual CO2 emissions over time. Global plastic production over time. Registered mobile money accounts over time by region. This is artificial intelligence. So this is a natural language processing artificial intelligence. And the green line is what's called Squad 1.1. And what the task was to read sort of like an SAT style passage with then multiple choice questions. And the AI could outperform human beings in around 2018 on that kind of task, answering multiple choice questions on a passage better than human beings could do. Squad 2.2 is a little bit more sophisticated. It's the same exercise, except in the multiple choice questions, there is no correct answer, and the AI has to look at it and say, there is no correct answer, so I'm not going to answer anything. Okay? and it could do that better than human beings in 2019. Okay? So what are the implications for us of all of this? There are now AIs that can write extended essays for you. Okay? So what does that mean for education? Really, right? So my premise is that the rate of change in the world drastically outpaces the rate of change in education. I would argue it is the slowest moving industry in the world, slower than coal. Okay? Really. If you imagine what education looks like today, for the most part, I mean the academic side of your education, I recognize that it's obviously much bigger than that, especially here, but the traditional academic side of your education, it is pretty much the same from the industrial era, right? Locked into groups based on age, sitting in a classroom, largely facing forward, teacher at the front, curriculum, textbook, follow this, write this exam, demonstrate your knowledge, and congratulations, here's a gold star, move on, right? That's typically what it is. It doesn't deviate too much for that. Now, the IB is probably the best at doing that, and does so in a really good way, right? But in many ways is still in that realm, okay? So for us, we're beginning to try and think about how do we look at things a little bit differently? How do we take into account all those graphs that you saw earlier? Our world today, I would argue, is almost irrecognizable to what it was 15 years ago. And the rate of change is only going to increase. So the tomorrow, 15 years from now, or 10 years from now, I will argue will look drastically different than it does today. And the fundamental question we have to ask ourselves is how are we preparing our youth to inherit all the chaos that collectively we as adults have caused in the world? Our children, or our current students, are going to inherit a world that is fundamentally more challenging than it is today. And how do we equip them for that? How do we help them to have the courage to move forward in the face of that tremendous complexity and adversity that they're going to face? And so where we're going is back to our origins in many ways. 3 fundamental pillars of a UWC education. Okay, I'd say I'd argue in the past, but also today. Around peace, experiential learning, that's the sort of the Kurt Hahn side, and the sustainability. And all of our 18 schools have great programming in these areas, but they're often done in silos. And so the question that we're asking is saying, rather than think of it like this, what if we thought of it like this? And what would it look like to create an education program that sat at the heart of the intersection point of those things? And so if we take peace, for example, for me what that represents is our unjust, unfair, unequal human systems that we've built, right? Sustainability is our fragile natural systems. And the intersection of those 2 points, for me, that's a truism that we don't spend enough time thinking about. We do now in some circles, but I would argue nowhere close to what we need to. The fact that we cannot actually sustainably solve any of our climate emergencies if we at the same time cannot understand our unequal human systems that sit behind that cause what we see in our environment. And when our environment shifts, so do our behavior patterns, our consumption patterns, our values, our migratory patterns, our tension over scarce resources. All of that changes when the environment changes. And so preparing students for the inherent complexity of that, I believe, is our role. That is what we need to do today to prepare our students for the next decades ahead, where this complexity is going to be so important to understand if we want to solve both our human social ails that we have, the virus that infects our human societies, okay? And at the same time infects our natural world, that those 2 things are deeply interconnected. So focusing on that. And the experiential learning piece is about an action orientation. So it's about saying it's no longer good enough to model it, to theorize about it, to read about it, debate about it, model UN about it. All that kind of stuff is not good enough. Our students actually have to learn how to take good action. And when I say good action, I mean it's difficult. It's difficult to take good action in a complex set of systems to understand how to make sustainable change there. So how do we at least give them a seed of understanding how to do that well? How do you create change that doesn't further the silos that we're already seeing more and more in our world? I mean, just yesterday we saw in the US, we knew that was coming, but unbelievable, right? We live in an increasingly, in the Western world at least, a more polarized world, a more polarized political climate. How do we ensure that our students are helping to break down silos, build bridges across those silos, rather than taking decisions or actions that reinforce silos? That's difficult, right? But how do we at least help them to build that understanding of how to do that within this context? So then I'm also a structure systems kind of person. So we need absolutely systems and structures to bring that to life. You just can't talk about it and imagine it's going to happen by accident. It's not, right? And so what we're looking to do is to create, what you see in the middle there, is a center, an institute. This is just a placeholder name for now. It's a little bit in concept, but it's being refined over time. And the purpose of that center is around systems change and the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. The idea of being an engine room for the college that helps to build understanding and pedigree in that particular space, that overlap of human systems, natural systems, and experiential learning of action orientation. Helping to build expertise in an area where I would argue there's very little, especially at the high school level. And so using that center as the engine room for that to conduct research, both on the outcomes of the work that we do, but also research on that actual intersection point and the education of youth around that. It'll be about content development and impact. The stuff on the outside is great stuff we already do, and it helps to bring a sort of a unifying force to all those amazing things that we do, Project Week, conferences, Lighthouse, Changemaker, that happen somewhat in their own silos right now. But the bottom part's the most exciting, which is a new educational pathway. So what we're thinking about is how do we use the core of our education to help to bring about this wider purpose? And that's where we've been doing some really interesting work around that. And so I'll speak about that in a moment, but that's our purpose, where we're trying to go in the next 10 years. And we need to enable that. And these are the things I'll speak about briefly. So the first around the new educational pathway. So we, on March the 7th, had a tremendous workshop here at the college where we had a broad range of stakeholders present to help us to build a prototype of what this could be. So we had Faith, who's a new executive director of the UWC International, who was here, which is great. We had the head of UWC Dilijan, which was excellent. We had Anton Begun, who's the chief academic officer at the IB. He's the number 2 person in the IB who came as part of the workshop. We had several governors, students, teachers. We had the CEO of a fintech bank in London. We had LSE professors. We had McKinsey partners. We had, together in the room to help to think about what this could look like. So what we're looking to do is in 2023 to pilot a program for 20 students where they would take 4 IB diploma subjects. We would take a third of their time, which would then be about 400 hours, and create something new that complements what is a really good, standard curriculum-based, exam-based education. Okay? And something to complement that. So something that is much more systems thinking-based, design thinking-based, deeply collaborative, deeply rooted in compassion, something that is then problem-based, so where they identify a problem that they want to dedicate their time towards, that's located in the SDGs, that's systemic in nature, and then dedicate the next year and a half to trying in some way addressing that problem, a global one that manifests itself locally somewhere, either here in Wales, in the UK, or in their home context. And let them work towards that intrinsically motivated to do so. We have enough extrinsic motivation in their lives, right? And we know that at the end of the day, when you are in your career, in your profession, so much of what you do ultimately relies on you and what you believe that's important and the values you may have and all those kinds of things. And we do a really good job of training that out of students through high school, right? It is such an intrinsically motivated place. Get this grade, work for this achievement, receive this honor, those types of things, which are all extrinsic in some way, shape, or form. And really thinking about how do we do that from within? How do we actually honor the tremendous diversity that students bring to this place? When you have a set curriculum, you put it in front of students and say, here's what we believe you should learn, regardless of where in the world you come from, regardless of what tremendous experiences you've had, what problems you have seen, what hardships you've come from, here's what you should learn. And this is flipping it a little bit and saying, what do you think is important based on who you are as a person? And how do you pull in what you need to help you solve what you're trying to solve? As opposed to saying, here's what you need to do. Okay, so that's what we're thinking about there. And I've mentioned the bit at the bottom there. And of course, lots of complexities and challenges around that we're still working on, but exciting. The next is you need structure. You need leadership. to help to make this go. So we've been in the midst of rethinking a bit of our org structure. This is new and will be implemented for next year. So on the academic side, we're looking to have 3 people. We've appointed one for the VP of Academics. We're in the midst of appointing the middle one, and the last one we've hired someone for already, the VP of Educational Innovation, who'll be helping to lead what I just mentioned on the last slide. And that's sort of the academic side of the house, you could say, the student-centered experiential learning side of the house. The other side is our operational side, where we've got some tremendous people there as well, who are already in place. And so setting up a structure that allows us to be able to take on more strategically and at the structural level will be really important for us as a platform to go forward on. So the next is about our space. With this kind of educational vision, I don't know how many of you have been back to the academic area of the school. Has anybody gone back to see any of the buildings at all? Looks pretty familiar, right? Yeah, it hasn't changed. And really it's incredible what our teachers do, given what we have, from a sort of just, current educational working spaces, right? And, it's just no longer fit for what we need, really. And as we want to go forward and create what we want to create from an educational vision standpoint, we need the space to make that happen. Okay, and so this is a rendering of what we are intending to do, which is not to break it down, because that would be environmentally irresponsible, especially because the buildings themselves are in good shape. Okay, they're sound. But instead, gut the insides of them, make them more appropriate, bring in the space that is currently outside in between the buildings, bring them in-house with some good lighting, refresh of the space. And that's what we're looking to endeavor to do. We then have, of course, the castle, which is the heartbeat. Okay? This particular building is so important to the lifeblood of what happens here. And so for us, it is a tremendous responsibility and honor that we have to help to maintain this tremendously historic and important piece of architecture in Welsh history. Okay, it is a tremendous honor to be able to have that, and tremendous honor for our students to be able to still learn here in the same way all of you did. However, we are challenged at this moment in time. The last major renovation on this place was in Hearst's time. Okay, and so what you see there in red, and we had an extensive survey done that was sponsored by 2 alumni. Who helped to fund this castle survey that we'd undertaken by Job Clues, who's an expert in the space of historic sites. And what they've identified for us is that of our 48 roofs, approximately I think 24 of them are in trouble. Okay, the ones in red are in big trouble. Okay, so the portcullis, for example, is one of them. Okay, the image in the front there, the portcullis that we have. Okay, so that roof is in trouble. Part of what sits over the academic arm of the school from an offices standpoint, those offices are also leaking and those kinds of things. How many of you walked on the roof when you were here? Not that that's to account for all of the damage. But I hope you had fun. We're paying for it now. But all jokes aside, that has partially contributed to the problem that we have. and so we've had to actually do a very hard stop in the last couple of years of any student walking. It's actually a very serious offense at our school now to walk on the roof, both from the health and safety standpoint and the damage standpoint that it causes to the castle. So anyways, this is something that is tremendously important for us as we think about our next 10 years going forward. Student diversity. I mean, this is one of the most fundamental elements of what makes an AC education what it is, and indeed a UWC education writ large what it is. This is what our numbers look like today, okay, on the left-hand side. So we have approximately 50% of our students on some degree of funding. What that works out to in sort of real terms is the equivalent of 35% of students on full funding. That's, of course, spread out over more than 35% of students, which is why it's represented there as 50% of students. 50% of our students are full fee paying. Okay? This is not where we would like to be, okay, but this is where we are. And in short terms, it's because the rate of decrease of public funding that this school used to live on, public funding largely from the UK, but also from beyond, because many students who came from other parts in the world came with money that came from their governments. with them that is essentially all dried up with the exception of Scandinavia. Right? Those are the only countries that send some amount of money with the students who come here. But otherwise, the college receives no public funding. Okay? There are some other UWCs that do receive some public funding, and there are some other UWCs that have angels, right, that fund a good chunk of what they do. RBC, for example, in Germany, as an example, right? And there are others that have that. And there tend to be newer colleges. But for older ones like ourselves, like Pearson, for example, we really rely heavily on philanthropy to help to fund scholarships. There is no other source other than parental income, right? And so that is part of the challenge. We are ambitious in what we hope to do in the future around that, but that's the reality of where we are today. But we'd like to be in a different place. On the right-hand side is a look at our sort of geographic makeup, if you will, and I know it's hard to read in the back, but the big blue one is Europe, and that accounts for about 40% of our population. Africa at the bottom in the red is about 8%. The Americas about 17% in yellow. In green, Asia about 26%, and the MENA region about 5%. So this is excellent. The diversity geographically has absolutely increased over time, which is wonderful to see, but we'd like this to increase even more. And we also don't want it to increase on socioeconomic lines in connection to regions, right? Because that's not true, nor is it healthy, right, for a diverse population. So we look to see socioeconomic diversity spread throughout each of these regions represented here, because otherwise you run into other kinds of problems. It's really hard to break down those inbuilt biases that most of the world has around some populations in the world. And if you continue to reinforce that by the population you bring in, you don't do any service to what the reality is actually on the ground in those very diverse parts of the world. Sub-Saharan Africa is a tremendously diverse place, socioeconomically tremendously diverse, right? We often think of it in a singular way, and if we do that here, then we actually cause more harm than good, I would argue. And so that for us is really important. And around financial sustainability, that also for us is really important. And Ria, who's our head of finance, will be speaking in a few moments to give you a bit more detail about this. But as I mentioned, we've got some challenges that we're working towards from a sustainability standpoint, but increasing scholarship provision, backlog and renovations, capital projects that we're working on, and educational innovation are all the needs that we have. And we recognize that on our site, at a number of 350 students, we simply don't have enough. We don't simply make enough from a surplus standpoint year on year to be able to reinvest in our infrastructure. Okay, and so we are strategically and largely, just to be really transparent about it, largely due to financial concerns, increasing our population from 350 to 380. Okay, I love to say it's for values. I love to say it's for the learning experience. Those are maybe secondary concerns. The primary one is financial. Okay, but that in turn will allow us to be able to build a surplus in the realm of about £500,000 per year. So we already do turn a surplus, which you'll see in a second, but we're looking to have £500,000 a year in surplus. So over a period of time that allows us to build up a reasonable amount to begin to pick off some of these important capital areas that we have needs around. So all of this will be underpinned by a 10-year strategy. That's what we're looking to build, something that gives us a runway to be able to implement some of these really interesting, hopefully inspiring, but complex and challenging things. And given that education is a slow-moving beast, a 10-year runway is necessary for bigger kind of ideas. And that's what we're looking to be able to do. So I'm going to pass it on to Ria to share a bit more about the finances.
Quite an act to follow, which I won't do. Good morning, everybody. Just first of all, it's really lovely to see you all here on campus. Welcome back. I hope you enjoy the weekend, and I hope the weather, the storm holds off so that we can enjoy a bit more of the weekend outside. I'm Ria. I'm head of finance here at Atlantic College. I've been at the college for a year. Prior to that, my experience was in industry, most recently in a role in a private equity-backed company that was going through some significant growth. So really, really great, motivating roles. But I had the opportunity to reflect, and I thought, for me, what was important was to be able to apply my profession as an accountant in an organisation where I just felt much more aligned with and much more passionate about. So it was a deliberate move from industry into charity and education, and genuinely I don't think I could have found a better fit than UWC Atlantic. So I'm really, really proud to be here. Leading on to what Nahid was saying, the finances of the college really underpin our ability to deliver on our purpose and our vision. So I just wanted to share with you our current financial position and how that fits into the wider strategy. I can't see the slide, but I won't go through, no need to look at the numbers in any detail. I'm sure at the back you can't see the numbers. So I'll just talk you through sort of the fundamentals of where we are at the moment. So we forecast our income next year with a student population of 365 to be 13 million. So at the college we have two income streams. We have income from college fees, obviously through the combination of both fee payers and that is met through philanthropy. And we also have another income stream in terms of how we use this incredible campus to deliver other streams of income. So for example, just this week, we had a national television network filming in the castle to build upon. But strategically, in order to deliver our educational vision and to move away from our reactive maintenance, to invest in our built environment, to take good care of this beautiful castle, we want to increase the surplus to 500,000, as Nahid has said. And in order to do that, reaching a population of 380, while protecting the really special and unique experience of the students, becomes one of the ways in which we achieve this. Some other areas linked to finance in terms of our focus in the short term. So we've invested in new systems in order to improve the timeliness and quality of our management information, and that directly supports well-informed decision-making. We've also examined our current financial model in the context of financial sustainability, and we'll work on developing this to help to enable our strategy. And importantly, we're further investing in our people to improve safeguarding and well-being. So for the start of the next academic year, we're looking to put into post a psychologist, an additional qualified nurse, and additional night supervision in order to support well-being and safeguarding. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? I introduced myself yesterday, but for those that are joining us online, my name is Andrea Diaz. I am the director of the Philanthropy and Engagement team. And I wanted to talk about how I joined and about the alumni community, how important you are to the college. So I'm Mexican and French. I have been living in London for 22 years. I came to London to do a master's degree when I was working for the government in international relations. And then I decided to change my path to do something more, more rewarding than politics. So I started to work for a charity. So anyway, I've been in the charitable sector for more than 15 years, and I learned about UWC Atlantic through one of the trustees of the board, who told me about your mission and the education model that you had here, and I couldn't believe that this existed. I really thought that the mission was quite relevant, especially now, what we're living and we're seeing in the world, and I wanted to join. So I decided to join 4 years ago, and when I came here, I realized that there was a lot of potential, especially with our alumni network. We have more than 9,000 alumni. It's a truly diverse community, and it's very global. And all of these alumni, they are doing amazing projects and changing the world in different ways in all sectors of the economy. But I also realized that the community wasn't really connected in a vertical line. You only know your first years and your second years, but you don't know anyone 10 years below or 10 years above. So I thought, there's a lot of potential here to harness that knowledge and that community. So we decided to develop a project to engage alumni to be able to give time and talent, as well as your finance, support, financial support. So now we have a very robust program. a very robust program of engagement activities. So you can go and help us in different ways. You can give back your time, your talent by becoming a speaker in one of your online lecture programs that we have, become a lecturer, or join us in one of our events, also sharing your knowledge. But also, you can be part of your class rep groups. We have amazing class reps. I just want to thank two of them, John and Tom, that they really help us to mobilize their classes, to restore the pools. I don't know if you have seen the pools, they're amazing. And that's thanks to all those class reps that they help us to mobilize our classes and support the college to do that. Also, as Nahid mentioned, we have this initiative called The Lighthouse. It's an innovation hub, and you can become one of the members of the panel to choose those projects that students are doing and help mentor them to develop the projects. We have had already alumni doing that. You can mentor other alumni as well. So there are many, many different ways in which you can contribute to the community. If you are interested, please send us an email to join@uwcatlantic.org, and we will be delighted to have your support. The next one, please. But obviously, your financial support is really, really important. As Nahid said, we have very ambitious plans for the future, and this is one of the projects that we're raising money for. So the educational innovation, we are raising £700,000 to enable that in the next 3 years. The next one, please. And in terms of scholarships, obviously this is at the heart of what we do. We couldn't maintain our diverse student population without the scholarship. So at the moment we're raising £3.7 million, and we want to raise in the next 5 years, double that, and then in the next 10 years get to £6.3 million. So we can get to this target that Nahid mentioned, to have 60% of our students on a full scholarship. So this is what we need to raise. The next one, please. Another important project to enable this financial sustainability that we're looking for the college is the restoration of Powys. I don't know if some of you are staying there, but it's in need. I know this is close. Yeah, of course, it's close. Because we need to restore it. We need to bring it to the current standards, and we want to make the house really sustainable. And this is the house that will allow us to get to 380 students model that Nahid was mentioning, and Andrea as well, and will help us to have a more financial sustainability. So we're raising 1.2 million for that to make it completely sustainable. We are going to invest in solar panels. We're completely insulate the house, change the pipelines so they can be connected to a heat air pump that is very sustainable. So there are many, many elements that we're incorporating to the house. And then Nahid mentioned as well the education hub. Obviously, this will be the support of this new educational model. And the idea is to connect all these 3 buildings that we have. And this is more in the long term. We are looking at a horizon of the next 6 years. And we need £8 million to develop that project. And finally, our castle, which is at the heart of what we do. It's an amazing, amazing building. And we had done a proper survey, and to restore all the roofs and the needs that I have, it's £12 million. But this is a longer term project. The horizon is 10 years. And we will start with restoring the portcullis and the 2 roofs that are adjacent, that are from the academic department. Those are the most urgent ones. And that's around £1.7 million. And the other thing I wanted to share with you is I'm sure that you're aware that this year we will be 60 years. It is our 60th anniversary, and we will start the celebrations this October when the college was created. So we're hoping that you will join us in celebrate the college, reflect on all our achievements so far, our history, and what can we do to the future. We're really, really excited about what can we create this year to support the college in the next 60 years. So we are really in a very special moment at the college, and you have the power to help us transform the college. So these are the events. We will have the launch event in October at the college. Then there will be, important events, obviously, with students, and you are more than invited to join us. There will be the Project Week, and then we will have an event in London called the Courtham Circle. Is this forum where we will be discussing the topic of peace, building peace. And that will be followed by the UWC Day. It will be a very important day to celebrate with the whole community. And we expect to close the year in 2023 with an event with the Prince of Wales. So, you know, the Queen is the patron of the college, so we have been in negotiations and discussions with his office. So hopefully, yeah, we will have all those events. Those are the pillar events, but there will be many other events. And if you want to help us to host an event to celebrate the 60th anniversary, please get in touch as well. We will be delighted to do that. But thank you so much. We look forward to working with you to really achieve this ambition, all these ambitions for the college. And I will like to ask Nahid to address a few words to close the event. Thank you.
So as you can see, I'm fortunate to work with some tremendous colleagues, and just thanks to Ria and Andrea for all of your help and support. And so without sounding cliche-ish, right? Genuinely, you are needed. As you were 40 and 50 years ago, today you are still needed. I've heard some tremendous stories from you over the last 24 hours about the ways in which this college has impacted you and has shaped you. And I would ask that you help 60 more years worth of students who are in front of you to also benefit in the same way that you have by giving in a variety of ways that Andrea has spoken to. So with that, is to thank you and to open the floor to questions. Go ahead. Thank you for the question. Those who couldn't hear, it was about the crux of it was around the scholarship ambition and whether or not that's achievable or not. It's a great question, and absolutely it is a reach. I am an ambitious person, and our leadership team is also ambitious, as is our board, and so we absolutely want to set targets that we know are a reach, but also I believe have a pathway to it. So, for example, we right now have 58 sets of graduating classes. A minority of them right now, put together, a minority of them at this moment annually contribute a scholarship, okay? So let's imagine, just for example, that of those 58 graduating classes, 10 can't do it for whatever reason, so that's 48, okay? If each of those classes could give £35,000 per year for a scholarship student, then that is 48 additional students on full scholarship in a year, and that would take us above 50%. Okay? So in my mind, there's actually, in my mind, that's 100% doable. If you have a graduating class that's accessible on WhatsApp of 70, that's on average £500 per person per year. I think that's very reasonable. Now, the question is, can we mobilize it, right? Can we make it happen? That's the challenge. We all know that that's doable, an average of £500 per person per year. That's definitely doable. Now, can we make it happen? And that's always the hard part, right? And that's where we need you. So as an example of a pathway to get us there reasonably quickly, it is definitely possible. Now, the secondary question for me is, can you do that in a sustainable way? Meaning, can you build an endowment, for example, where you put all the hard work in the next 10 years, and then from there, you're in perpetuity for the next, hopefully, infinite, right? Hopefully. And so that's a different kind of challenge that we're also working on the side, is around endowment and ensuring that we have an endowment product that is an alternative for people who would like to give in a more sustained way in perpetuity to the college as well. Thank you. That's a great comment, and I'll ask maybe Jill in a moment to come perhaps and speak to that a little bit if you'd like. But the question was around understanding the totality of UWC writ large, and just, are there ways that we can learn more about the entirety of the project, so to speak, of the movement? And Jill, as you probably know, has spent a significant amount of time working at the international level, as well as Colin and a few others in this room towards that. And so probably Jill is better placed than me to speak to that.
Thank you. It's a great question. Yes, I was vice chair of UWC International for 5 years, and Paul Brunsrud, who's in the room somewhere at the back, he has just finished being vice chair of UWC International. So Paul may be able to answer this as well. It's a much more closely united movement now than it was in the past. In the past, it felt very disparate, to be honest, whereas now there is a solid core centre. I think we've got a most fantastic new chair of UWC International, who's a black Kenyan woman called Musimbi Kanora, and she's really striving to bring the organisation together. We have a UWC strategic plan that was a very, very comprehensive consultative process over the course of 3 years to put together. And that was been agreed by all UWC schools and colleges and national committees. There is an international board, which Colin Hapgood is on, and Colin may want to say a few words following mine. And there is a UWC council, which people like Nahid and I and other heads and chairs are on. And we meet once a year, the council, and the board meet once every 3 or 4 months. So it is a very much more cohesive group. Snowy just wants me to add one more thing. Yeah, I was coming on to that, yes. Patience. And the 155 national committees, they have also have a national committee structure. So they have, I think, 35 of them that are in the national committee, and they meet probably once every quarter as well. And there are also various other committees that are working with the council and working with the board. The heads meet once every 3 weeks virtually. So they have a very, very strong bond between the 18 heads as well. And the chairs, we meet twice a year. But again, we're on a WhatsApp group, and if ever anyone's got any queries, for example, some of them are looking for new heads now, so they've come to me to say, how did you manage to find this man? Because we want to copy the same process. Let's not reinvent the wheel. So there's a lot of best practice learning as well that's going on around the organisation. So hopefully that answers. Does that answer your question? Go again. Okay. So there's a good, thank you. There's a good comms, yes, you're also asking about how can we know more about the UWC movement. And a bit like Atlantic, there's a regular newsletters that come out. So the one thing that is not happening is you're not on that database. So you need to be, and it would be quite interesting to have maybe a show of hands as to who else also wants to be on that database. It's really interesting because you get to pick up other initiatives that are going on through the UWC schools and colleges and through the national committee system. I mean, first of all, who is on it already? Okay. And then secondly, who isn't on it but would like to be? Yeah, quite a lot. So we'll pick that up with Andrea and try and work out how we make that happen. Yeah. We will pick up on this after the reunion and send you an email that explains how you can join to get the newsletters directly from UWC International, but also how you can join the UWC Hub, which is an online platform to connect alumni. So we'll pick that up. Andrea will pick that up after the reunion. Thank you for the question.
I've lost the order now, so apologies. We can go. We'll go here. Over there, and then we'll come here next, and then we'll go to the person beside you after that, and there was another hand up here. Those are the four now. Thank you. I was. I should have said the man in the mask. Thank you. So for those who couldn't hear, in essence, the question was about the role of services at the college, both social as well as outdoor and on the seafront, and also about sustainability and what are the college's plans around that environmental sustainability looking forward. So service continues to remain an integral part of UWC and AC education. The pandemic has been really challenging because, as you can imagine, it hits at the very core and fabric of all schools, but especially a school like ours, where it relies so heavily on human interaction and relationship. And that was severed for the past 2 years in a really hard way. And so in the last couple of months, as we've kind of slowly come out of the pandemic, we've already begun to resuscitate some of those relationships with schools in particular who've been very keen. So we've had a number of primary schools, for example, come in and restart some of those relationships with refugees, both in Llantwit Major as well as in Cardiff, engaging with those communities. Our project week was excellent. We had the chance to be able to go out into communities in Wales and work with various communities in mid-Wales, for example, and be able to do some environmental work at that time as well. So it's been a slow build-up back, you could say. The last 2 years definitely have resulted in a tremendous depletion of the amount of service work that our students could do, both water-oriented as well as social in nature. But going forward, it absolutely remains a core part of what we do. And part of the way that I'm wanting to push us to think about services, as well the social side of services, is that we don't only engage at the human-to-human level, which is so important as you care for others and work with other people, and the tremendous amount that helps to build in a young person. Arguably, it does a lot more for me than it does for the people that I'm serving, right? And that's such an important part. But at the same time, I also want our students and staff to be thinking about the systemic root causes that cause the marginalization of that particular person that we are serving or helping. And so, the sort of simple example, if we're going to a food bank to help to, serve out food or to raise money for that food bank, that's well and good. But if that's all that we do, then we're falling short, right? Because we also should be beginning to understand what are the root causes of why that food bank has to exist in the first place, and making a small attempt to try and ameliorate that in some way. So that's the way in which I would like our social services to begin to move a little bit where possible. It's not always possible, but that's what we'd like to try and do. On the seafront side, definitely we've faced some challenges in the last couple of years around going to the seafront. Part of them regulatory in nature, part of them staff skill and so on, to engage in that. This year particularly has been a particularly rough year for us that way, because it was found that we are not in compliance from a coding standpoint of our boats to be in this type of water that we are in. So the regulatory framework has made things difficult. But thanks to Ruth, our vice chair of our board, to Pelham Allen, who's from the class of 67, I believe, 69, who's been supporting us as well, thanks to people like Dagfin, with Robin Jenkins, working together to be able to figure out a way through it. And we believe that we have found a solution to be able to get our boats back on the water. We are optimistic that by next year we'll be able to re-engage in training for rescue services. Would be difficult to actually rescue, right? That's still going to be a challenge for us, but to at least do the training of it. And then the beautiful thing about Atlantic Pacific, which is what Robin Jenkins' organization is that they then do offer the opportunity for some of our students to potentially be able to serve in a rescue standpoint elsewhere in other places in the work that they do. So that's what we're looking for there. We're also looking to bring back parts of our lifeguarding and those kinds of things. So essentially in our strategic plan, there's a direct line in there about it. And what we are keen to do is to bring back as much as we possibly can within our different or stricter regulatory framework that we operate in, to bring back as much as we possibly can around the seafront. That is a critical part of our school and something that I want to see come back in the best way possible. On sustainability, we're working on that in a couple of angles. So we've recently hired a director of operations and sustainability, and that sustainability is the environmental one, not the financial one. And that person, David is his name, he grew up in St. Donat's, works in Cardiff, and now is joining us, wonderful person, and he will help to lead some of this from a structural standpoint. So while we want to think about it in two ways, one is the way in which we live as a college. How do we actually operate? What is our carbon footprint as a college? Where are the areas of weakness? And for us, the single biggest one is energy, right? That's the biggest way in which we pollute the environment and our largest carbon footprint, other than people flying into the college, which arguably is probably bigger, but otherwise around our energy use. So that's a sort of a largely a non-student-based thing. That's a structural infrastructure built environment type of thing. And then the second is around education, which is what you spoke about. And so on that, what our recognition is that we do some really great stuff there now, but it's not intentional enough in that not every student by design has an education on environmental sustainability, on the climate emergency, those kinds of things. And that's part of what we need to build as part of our new educational pathway that hopefully as it develops and if it is successful, allows us to then expand that and scale it to the rest of our community. And in parallel, developing more of an intentional education around sustainability. We have a course called Environmental Systems and Societies, which is an IB course that many students do. And we do have a course that we created called Ocean Systems, where our students would go out on boats into the water to do research largely on what happens in oceans. And we did that in conjunction at times with various universities. But that's work that will continue for us as well. So that's what we're currently doing in that sort of space, but absolutely more can be done, and appreciate you raising that. I can relay your... great question around neurodiversity is another aspect of diversity that we didn't speak about or show in any of our presentation. And so for us, neurodiversity, of course, is absolutely important, and as you say, will happen to some degree just by chance in an average population in the way in which it works, but it can also happen by design. And so the question is more geared towards, our ability. I think implicit in that is, how do we support it, and do we actually sort of seek it actively in many ways? So a more recent, in the last couple of years, addition to the services that we provide at the college is around learning support. And so we do have 2 people now who are full-time hired, whose role it is to support students from a learning standpoint, and that often takes into account those students who represent neural profiles that are different to what is the sort of assumed norm, which is what typical education is built on, right? A typical book-based education is the one that we offer, and A-levels offers, and most countries offer, is based on that sort of normative type of profile. And then you treat everybody else as somebody who needs support or help, right? Which in of itself is a massive educational paradigm shift that still is in process of occurring. And so for us, we definitely do not discriminate students on that basis from the college. There are, however, some limits to what we are able to, feel like we can put our hand up and say, yes, we can support you in this, given the educational program that we still do offer. So in that sense, there are some limits to the degrees of autistic, for example, that we can have, or of some form of visual impairment or hearing impairment, where we are able to accommodate to a certain level of it. So it is something that I agree is really important. Just yesterday, there was some research that came out of Cambridge that was talking about dyslexia, and basically saying that we should no longer be treating it as a disorder. It is just a human variation, that is actually quite normal in our environment, and we should be thinking about it differently. So I'd say we're still on a journey, but we do have support, and something that we are conscious of. I can't say that we, actively recruit for it at this moment in time, but we definitely don't hard filter it out, if that makes sense. So I'll just hands, so I'll do another 4 or so. So we'll do 1, we'll do 2, we'll do 3, and we'll do 4, and then we'll check the time after that. Go ahead. A great question. So the question was around personal development, more or less, of the individual, of the student, and how does that fit into the overarching big sort of picture? And it's a really interesting question, right? Because it's one of the things about education that sometimes others who are not in education have a hard time with, right? And that's around this idea of being able to predict an outcome. Because fundamentally, when you're dealing with human beings, they are very much, in most part, their own people with their own agency. And so sometimes when you have this sort of idea of, I'm going to work towards this, and I'm going to guarantee that we're going to have 80% of students who achieve this and do this and all that kind of stuff, right? At the end of the day, we're dealing with fundamentally human beings, and we need to respect that at its core. So I appreciate your question in that way. So for us, the sort of the balance of the development of the individual needs of a student within what is a broader community, which I think we do, generally speaking, really well, is so important. One of the things popping up pretty high on our radar, as it is in most educational institutions, is around the notion of well-being. A lot of it comes from sort of a positive psychology type of basis and background. So what we're looking to do is to help students there in that frame. Not only access what are the more kind of acute elements of well-being, which is sort of more the mental health side, where students sometimes require support in that area so that they can be their best individually, but at the same time helping to give them the proactive skills so that they are able to manage what is coming towards them. It is almost now, I would say, almost an empirical truth, not quite yet, but almost an empirical truth, that our youth over the last 15 years have had an uptick, at least in the Western world, or at least largely in sort of North America and the UK, I'll speak for from a research standpoint, in uptick in mental health concern. And that is triangulated with a lot of different factors. And so what most of the research will point to is a couple of things. One is the changing parenting style, particularly of middle and upper middle class families in the West. where more and more are double sort of university educated, many are dual sort of professional families, and the way in which they aspire for their children are different, and the kinds of pressures they put on, the way in which that they sort of want their success or want to ensure their success causes parenting styles that remove autonomy and responsibility from young people to make mistakes, and that is sometimes a challenge. That's compounded with an ever increasingly competitive university environment where now more and more people around the globe want their students or their children to go to, and those institutions that are already competitive have only become more competitive, and that again causes an added layer of stress on that system. The other factor that's causing it is around mobile phone uptake, and mobile phone uptake is linked to social media, and that is also now more or less becoming empirically true that there's a relationship there between youth mental health and social media usage and uptake. And then you add the pandemic on top of that, and there is no doubt that the pandemic has caused a tremendous hit to the overall well-being of our young people. And so all of that is sort of pushing well-being as an agenda item for young people to the fore and helping them to learn how to be able to cope and become more resilient. And these things that people in your/my generation were able to perhaps not be affronted with so much, but also were to accrue in different kinds of ways for different kinds of factors. And that has changed. The landscape has changed. In fact, a lot of the research now is also saying around youth that we as a society collectively are infantilizing our youth. That in many developmental ways, not IQ actually, IQ is one area that actually they're further ahead than our generations were. But in terms of their social development in so many ways, that they're actually between 6 months and 18 months behind sort of 25 years ago. What were milestones 25 years ago are now 6 months later up to 18 months later. And that includes things like alcohol consumption, sex, dating for the first time, driver's license, all those kinds of things are actually delayed. And so that's a different kind of challenge. So the individual development for people in the context of well-being is sort of the way that we are intentionally looking at it. Personal responsibility and autonomy remains a core part of what we do here. And in some ways that is moderately questioned, you could say, around the increasing and important safeguarding regiment that is existing in Wales and in the UK. And it is for the most part very good, those changes, but are also in some ways challenging us in the way we think about student autonomy in relation to safeguarding. And so that's an area of development for us at this moment in time as well. We are engaging on a very intentional life skills-based program to support, again, what you were asking around the development of the self and personal responsibility as well. So I'd say well-being is the overarching umbrella under which that's happening. I think I went here next, yes. That was an empirical truth, right? That was an empirical truth. I don't think I'll be able to restate your question as politically savvy as you did, but I'll have a go at it. So what he shared was that hopefully when all of you come back in 10 years' time, many of you will be over the age of 80. Not my words. And just asking, is the college playing a proactive role in, supporting as easily as possible for those who wish to include the college as part of its estate in a legacy kind of capacity going forward? How is that happening? And I wonder, Andrea, if you want to speak to that, or would you like me to speak to that? Yeah.
Yes, we do have a legacy program. So if you want to know more about it, come and talk to me, or send us an email, join in, and definitely there's, you can make a pledge and leave a gift in your will. And there's a very simple process. You just need to talk to your lawyers and leave that, and then decide what kind of, gift, because there are different options of what you can leave in your will. But I'm happy to discuss in more detail if you're interested. But definitely we have a program, and that is going to go to support the endowment of the college. So all your legacies, and we have already alumni that have pledged big legacies to the college, and that will go to enrich the endowment that, all that revenue that produces every year will be used to different purposes at the college, scholarships, but also to restore the fabric of the college.
So we launched an event in London back in the fall around the legacy giving program, and what we're finding in the U.S. is where typically they tend to be a bit ahead in terms of philanthropic tools and methods that people can give, and what they're finding in the U.S. absolutely is that it's seeming to be a preferred way for alumni to be able to give, because it's a way in which that they can have a long and sustained impact on an institution that hopefully shaped them in some way well into the future. And so if that's of interest. Another area of interest, though, by the way, this is just more of a personal one, is that many of you are probably sitting on some cryptocurrency that you maybe don't want anymore. We're happy to take it off your hands if you're just sitting on it. No problem. I'll play the long game with it in our account. So no problem. It's a half joke, but it's half serious. So we actually are kind of looking into that. That if you for a way that if you wanted to share other kinds of assets, crypto may be an easy one right now. But if you wanted to share other assets, of course, in a very legal way with us, would be shares or whatever that might be, that may also be a possibility that we're looking to try and develop in the future. Thank you. He was just sharing a reflection about some elements of the college, one being about the valley and happy that the greenhouses that are there are being used. And just really quickly there, it is an area that we're looking to continue to bring back, and a lot of work has been done in the last couple of months. We've hired a valley grower who's an expert organic horticulturist who's come in and really helped to develop it for the growing season. And so no doubt come September it'll just have produced a great amount of food for us. And part of our model is to do more and more sort of farm to table kind of stuff and have stuff from the valley come directly into our kitchen, which it already has been doing late this year and more into next year. So thank you for that. The second was around the boat and RNLI and so on, and the patent and those kinds of things for it, and how we did sell the rights for £1 to RNLI, and one of the most tremendous acts of service right, that the college engaged in what is the betterment of humanity across now the world in many ways. What a tremendous gift that this college has given, and many of you were involved in that in some way, shape, or form to the world. And yeah, I guess and part of the question was around, in the future as we develop more innovations, would we look to find ways to retain some of the possible monetization of things for the college's purposes? And that's an interesting question. And so, one idea is around, or that has been suggested, is around things like, as we engage in our new educational pathway, and part of that might be students creating their own startups, might come as a byproduct of that. And we may support that and indeed give seed funding, as we do now for the refugee app that we were doing. Do we as a college say to that, we're helping you with all this, perhaps you give us 10% of that startup, and in the event it, hits it, then the college benefits in some way. Those are conversations that aren't yet at all finalized, but are on our radar, and just appreciate you raising that. I think we'll have time probably for one more question. I think there was one here, I believe. Yes. So great question was about the new educational pathway and what's the future of that if it is successful. The pilot is for 20 students. What happens next? It's a great question. I think the ideal, and this is really in the ideal this moment, would be that if it is successful, because we've had a diverse student body who's tried it, so we know it's scalable across linguistic differences, cultural differences, those kinds of things, then it would be to be able to, at least in the first stage, offer it to anybody who would want it, and potentially make it the default, perhaps. I'm speculating a bit here. But also beyond that, if it is successful, we would love to be able to share it with our partners in UWC who we're already beginning to work with on it, but also beyond that, because that is, I think, our moral responsibility. One of the reasons why I came here to the school was because the way in which you can shape the discourse of international education from this seat is unlike any other in the world. And therefore, with that responsibility, I believe comes the moral imperative to share whatever it is that we develop that is for the good of students, because every student in the world is our student, fundamentally. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Naheed. I hope you all found that inspiring and interesting, and you can really sense the energy and vision that Naheed is bringing. Funnily enough, it's raining. Barbecue is cancelled. So lunch will be in the dining room. Nothing much we can do about that, but we're hoping for sunshine later on. 3:30 this afternoon, Dagfinn and Anne are going to be talking about their book. So we're very much hoping that as many of you as possible will be coming. That's going to be in here. And then at 4:30 this afternoon, we've got a very special thing happening. Elizabeth and Veronica Sutcliffe are coming, with Michael Sutcliffe's probably here already, as it's his anniversary too. And we're going to be planting a tree in David's memory, and that's at 4:30, and that is in between the admin block and the principal's house. You'll start to see us all gather. There'll be a few of us there. So if we're going to do both, we're going to sprint from here straight out to the tree planting ceremony. And then John Conningham and Hugh Davis from the 70s and the 80s have then very kindly agreed to the second half of the ceremony to be planting trees for both cohorts in different parts of that garden as well. If you've got an umbrella, please bring it. Thank you. Sorry, two more quick things. First of all, you'll see in the breakfast room a variety of different black and white photos from the 60s and early 70s. Just please, as you go through anytime over the weekend, they're copies of them, they're not the originals. If you recognize anybody in them, you are the only people who are going to be able to help us with this. Please just scribble on the notice board who you think they are. We've found already some people from this process in the last few weeks. We found these photos in the archive. We're now looking at a 60th anniversary exhibition, and your help is really needed to be able to give us more information about who these people are. That's the first thing. The second thing is tonight we are auctioning two very, very special pieces of art. the year of the 1970s, you'll be pleased to hear that Alan Hall's sister, Muriel, has agreed to sell something that Alan Hall had very special emotional attachment to, which was a Charles White print. As you all know from that era, he was the first art teacher here, and so that will go up on a silent auction this evening, and we very much hope that you'll be able to support the sale of that painting. All the proceeds for that will go to the Alan Hall Scholarship Fund. And for the classes of 1980s, Fiona Hawthorne, the artist Fiona Hawthorne, who was from the is from the class of 1982, who's here this weekend, has produced the most amazing mural of the college life, let's put it that way. That's up for auction as well. It's on metal, it's just dramatic, it's beautiful, it's fun, it's funky, it's everything Fiona is. And so we're very much hoping that'll probably appeal more to the classes of 80, 81, 82, who knows Fiona very well. And I believe Colin Salmon and Charlie Sidifan have agreed to sort of coordinate both of the sales of those two prints. So we just wanted to mention that as well today. And I think that they'll both be on display somewhere in the castle before this evening. Okay, thank you all very much indeed, and enjoy your lunch.